Hello Internet, Taliesin here, and today we are not talking Azerite armour. We are not talking class tuning or warfronts or island expeditions or PvP or old gods or why in Hazakostas might be an old god who must be destroyed. No! This week in our midweek Taliesin talks, we're going to take a little step back from all of the stuff that is actually happening in game, because that's what the weekly reset is for after all, and we're going to have some fun because this is my channel and I deserve it. So today we are talking Blizzcon, and we are talking allied races. Because I think it's fair to say that whatever your opinion of the expansion so far, Battle for Azeroth needs a good Blizzcon in a couple of weeks. When Ian and the rest saunter onto stage for the World of Warcraft What's Next panel, whatever it is he's about to tell us needs to go some way towards reigniting a player base that really desperately needs some good news, needs something to get very excited about, needs stuff that it can look forward to. And most of that is probably going to take the form of patch 8.2, maybe even a little look ahead at patch 8.3 as well. And we're going to do a proper BlizzCon predictions video probably next week, but with all of the 8.2 talk will obviously be glimpses of new story, maybe a new zone, a new raid, a new dungeon, new heritage armor sets perhaps. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a new cinematic we'll see, but it frankly wouldn't be Battle for Azeroth if there wasn't also the reveal of a new allied race or two, because I don't care who you are, allied races are fun and visual and a really easy way to get people excited and talking, which is exactly what BFA needs right now in the short term, to the extent that I think even if they weren't planning a new allied race in 8.2 originally, you had better believe that it's got a couple now. So today we're going to take a look at what those allied races might be, and I know what you're thinking, but Taliesin, if there are going to be new playable options, and it's pretty obvious what they'll be, right? Well, maybe. But I also think there's a couple of other avenues that Blizzard have been laying the groundwork for, and a couple of surprises they could throw our way too, especially if they decide to go into any real detail about 8.3. And hey, that makes this a speculation video, and you know what? Speculation is fun, okay? So join us as we forget our cares and worries for a few minutes, and we ask, what are the new allied races that Blizzard will reveal at BlizzCon, okay? Go, 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 go. So yeah, let's get these two out of the way straight off the bat, because let's be honest, these are the two that you thought of instantly when we even started talking about new allied races. The Vulpera and Sethrak are head and shoulders the two main candidates when it comes to who would be next on the allied race train, and not without good reason, with tons of evidence all over the place suggesting that Blizzard are preparing to unleash them into the game as new playable options. So let's start with the Vulpera, who have perhaps the most watertight case of all, because basically everything that you could ask for from a new playable race is already in place for these little fellas, and putting them in the player's hands probably wouldn't take much more than Blizzard just flicking a switch, or, you know, pressing a button. Firstly, there's their place in the story. Horde players have had loads of contact with the Vulpera as they level through Vol'dun, pretty much rescuing the entire species from slavery and winning their undying gratitude in the process. So not only do the fox midgets totally owe the Horde a solid, but their backstory of oppression and just trying to find a place in the world is exactly the kind of history that good Horde races have in general. There's even an existing reputation that Horde players have been building up in BFA specific to them. It's all just too perfect from a lore perspective, and we haven't even got to the models and animations yet. When Vulpera first appeared on the scene in the early alpha, they were essentially straight conversions of existing goblin models, using the same skeleton and animations, but by the time the expansion went live, they had undergone loads of tweaks and alterations to make them much more unique and expressive in their own right. They have established male and female models with tons of different customization options and as many available animations as other playable races, including, and this is a real giveaway you might think, the animation Art Off Loop, which is the standing holding your Heart of Azeroth and looking at your Heart of Azeroth, because you're a player playing in BFA, so you have a Heart of Azeroth and you'll need the Heart of Azeroth animation for when you use your Heart of Azeroth animation. But in my opinion, even more of a giveaway than the Heart of Azeroth is that Vulpera models are all properly animated to use what's called the player cape geoset, which is what allows for the cape physics when you're running and jumping and stuff. A job which must have taken no little time and effort to implement, considering Vulpera have a massive bushy tail scale to contend with, especially when you consider there's not a single Vulpera NPC in the game actually wears a cape. So why would they do that? That's it then, surely. Vulpera are absolutely 100% guaranteed, nailed on, dead certs to be the next allied race, right? Call it there, end of video, let's all get back to our island expeditions and salty forum posting. Well no, not so fast, cowboy, because yes, I agree, it's very likely that Vulpera will find themselves becoming the next Horde recruits in 8.2, but there's something that still bugs me about them. I mean, yes, it's obvious why the Vulpera would want to join the Horde, but honestly, would the Horde really want them? And I don't mean, oh, they're cutesy and annoying, that's the last thing anyone needs kind of way. I mean, would a Horde which included Vulpera actually be any stronger? Because it's obvious why Sylvanas wants to enlist the Zandalari, they've got a great navy, or the High Mountain, they're huge, or the Naga, they're nails, but what does a disparate band of foxes bring to the table? Nice wagons, I guess? I mean, genuinely, maybe they'll all be like, hey, Sylvanas, you need your supplies carted around in the war effort, and there's no one better at doing that on the down low than us foxes. Look, we've got alpacas. See, I'm pretty much joking, but that could genuinely be reason enough, I guess. Which brings us to the Sethrak, who have a lot in common with the Vulpera in just how obvious a choice they are, even if they don't make quite so perfect a fit. The devoted Sethrak interact with both Horde and Alliance during the Zandalar campaign, but it's the Alliance that they allow to set up shop in their own backyard. That's not the clearest bias ever, but as the Nightborn prove, allegiances don't have to be properly established for one faction over the other on first meeting for them to choose a side later on. It's quite possible that the Sethrak could see the Horde as being responsible for kickstarting the events in Uldir, or just quite like the Alliance hats or whatever, and it's clear why the Alliance would want them on board. They are an established army behind enemy lines who are wicked fighters, and let's be honest, they look baller. What's not to love about the Snek people? So I could totally buy all of the motivation involved, and model-wise, although the Sethrak models don't look like they'd fit being a playable race too well, they are actually much more detailed than you'd think. They also have the Cape Geo set added, they also have that Heart of Azeroth animation going on, and although they have less detail in their facial animations than maybe some other playable races, their movements are incredibly expressive and full of character, and if you're looking at that tiny little head and thinking, yeah, good luck getting any armor models on that Snek head, well, actually, you put Worgen helmet models on a Sethrak, and honestly, it looks a lot better than it does on a Worgen, so maybe that's not really a problem either. There is, though, a noticeable lack of female Sethrak out in the open world, but we do have an example of a female Sethrak model in Sethraliss, who is noticeably different. She has thinner arms and wider hips, and there are story hints that there might be an extensive Sethrak population living underground in Vol'dun, which Blizz could use to explain where all the girl Sneks are. Like I say, this isn't as perfect a fit as Vulpera, but it's nothing like impossible, and come on, if Blizz were to turn around and announce Snek people as an alliance race in 8.2, that would be just the kind of awesomeness, easy win excitement that they're going to need. So I rate Vulpera and Sethrak as being the next allied races at 9 and 7 Hearts of Azeroth out of Goblin model, respectively. Gosh, that one took a while. Let's try and be a bit quicker with the others, shall we? Okay, right, yes, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking F off Taliesin, those races clearly exist in the game already and have no place in a video about allied races. And you're half right, because we know that Blizzard are working on new Worgen and Goblin models, seeing as they're the only two races still stuck in their relatively low polygon count cataclysmic state. And you know, I really wouldn't be surprised to see a little preview of those new models at BlizzCon, because hey, why not? And you know what? While you're there and you're redoing all the models anyway, why not add some extra tweaks and options to give us some allied race potential from those new models too? Since before Battle for Azeroth was announced, I've been putting my money on a Night Elf Worgen variant. And now that both Gilneans and their suddenly treeless hosts are homeless again and fighting to take back Darkshore together, this could be the perfect time for those guys to make an appearance. Because you know what they say, you can never have enough elves, am I right? Well, okay, that's not a thing anyone says anymore, but I still think that Night Elf Worgen would be cool, don't at me. I rate them 6 burning trees out of Warfront. And as for goblins, well, it could reasonably be said that that Vulpera already are the Goblin Allied Race, since they're both built from such a similar base. But there's a tiny little idea that I can't quite get out of my head, and it involves data mined broadcast text from the Battle of Dazara lore, so red spoiler warning for that. But in that raid, it would appear that Mekka, the Gnome High Tinker, and Gallywix go head to head in an Azerite fueled mega tech battle, with each pulling more ridiculous mechanical tricks out of the bag with each new stage of the fight, and all the while Gallywix exclaiming that he needs more and more cool shit on his suit, which makes me think there must be teams of Goblin engineers making this stuff for him, right? Like, he doesn't build these gizmos himself, and what if he has been pushing those Goblin engineers harder and harder over the expansion to develop the best Azerite machinery? What if, after a few proper 100-hour crunch weeks, we get a new type of Goblin, a Mekka Goblin, fully Azerite empowered and augmented, and maybe a bit like the Clockwork Goblins from Warcraft 3, with appropriate racials and mechanical customization options. Now, it may sound like a bit of a stretch, maybe 4 chins out of Gallywix, but here's where it starts to sound a bit more likely, because if you're going to have Mekka Goblins, then you're probably also going to have... And if I'm honest, this is the real reason I suggested Mekka Goblins, is because I think Mekka Gnomes really, genuinely are a thing that we'll be getting in some form at some point. Don't forget, there was a Junker Gnome Island data mine for expeditions way back in the BFA Alpha that I don't think we've heard anything about since. There's that beautiful and totally unique gnomish scrapyard in Kultiras, which has had about as much explanation as an episode of Twin Peaks. And then, of course, there's that new High Tinker Mekka model too. Wouldn't it be cool if, like our Mekka Goblin idea, a whole new subset of options gave us half gnome, half robot hybrids? And it wouldn't just be visual differences. Maybe Junker Gnomes and Goblins could have access to Druid classes, because they are basically like Transformers and can take on different shapes. That would be wild and not totally ridiculous, now that we've established that not all druids in the game need to be Malfurions, Emerald Dream type druids. Zandalari Dinomancers and Kultiran Wickedrust monster things look to be doing away with that criteria, so why not push the envelope even further? It seems like an obvious choice when you think about it. It might surprise you that despite that, I'm going to rate Junker Gnomes a lowly 5 Mekka out of ice, for one very simple reason. I don't think they'll be an allied race. I think they will be a new playable class next expansion. Now, we'll end up making a video about this at some point, I'm sure, but I'm really quite certain that at some point we are going to see the Tinker class arrive in WoW sooner or later. And I'll be honest, the events and locations of BFA have done absolutely nothing to persuade me that that won't be the case. I think Tinkers will be playable by Gnomes and Goblins, and maybe Vulpera and Dark Iron Dwarves, and will use machines to cause damage, heal, and even tank. And actually, now I think about it, these Mekka Goblins and Junker Gnomes wouldn't actually have to be instead of the new class, would they? If anything, that actually helps set that up as a new class and expansion early. So you know what? I'm changing my rating for Mekka Goblins and Junker Gnomes to 6 junkyards out of Warcraft 3. Yes, it's that time in the Allied Race video where I'm afraid we have to talk about Naga. It happens every time. They are probably the most requested playable race that will never actually be a playable race in the history of WoW. A category that doesn't include Tuskaar, by the way, because Tuskaar absolutely will become an allied race, because if they don't, then all those letters I sent to Chris Metzen written in my own blood will have been for nothing, and I refuse to believe it was all for nothing. But this time, things might be a little bit different, because you know how in 8.1 we've got a little mini raid below the Shrine of the Storms, right? And it's all fishy and old goddy and stuff, and everyone thinks that might well be a springboard to a Naga-themed 8.2 that might even climax in a fight against Azara herself. Well, you know how if that happens, it's quite likely that 8.2 will end up with Azara totally dead, right? Well, if Azara is dead, what happens to the Naga in 8.3? And you know how Ian in Blizzcon 2016 was all like, and then after 7.2, we'll be taking the fight to mother effing Argus, and everyone was like, whoa, I'm so excited. Well, what if Blizzcon 2018, Ian is all like, and then after 8.2, you're gonna have some new allies in the fight, and it's gonna be mother effing Naga. I'm pretty sure that would get a similar reaction. Okay, so for this to work, I think you kind of have to assume that they could be a neutral race that could join either the Horde or Alliance, which kind of goes against the whole purpose of allied races a bit. And you also kind of have to assume that Blizz will finally be okay with you playing a race that doesn't have legs. But honestly, if you can get over the pain of never seeing the boots you equip ever again, well, most other armor fits the Naga models pretty nicely actually, except hats. Yeah, we're gonna have to do something about the helm. Gnomes, aren't we? Okay, fine, you know what? This is a terrible idea from the start. I wish I'd never brought it up, and I'm sorry we went there. Apart from the mic drop moment at Blizzcon and a vague possible future scenario where it could be possible, there's not much evidence to suggest that Naga are going to make their long-awaited playable debut in BFA, or ever. So I'm going to rate them 2 boots out of Tuskaar, sorry. Okay, so at the end of the Maga Orc Unlock scenario, when you've made your escape from Dran altogether, you can see some rogue Botani and Saberon who have come along for the ride, running out into the Barrens, all ready to shit up the local ecosystem with their foreignness. Basically, this means there are now Botani and Saberon living wild in the Barrens. Basically, this means that Saberon and Botani are now perfectly viable candidates for an allied race. Maybe it will even happen, but if it does, I don't think it's going to be this expansion. Let's give them time to get settled, have little families, and get something like fight ready. So 2 URLs out of Dark Portal. Dark Rangers is another possible allied race we've mentioned before that suddenly seem a lot more likely given recent in-game events. Dark Rangers are the High Elves that served alongside alive Sylvanas in life and now continued their devotion to dead Sylvanas in death. And let's be honest, they are super cool, but your options are a bit limited really, because they're just pale undead blood elves, aren't they? And specifically female at that. Well, not anymore, because let's get that red spoiler warning up again and tell you all about the events on Darkshore in 8.1, where Horde players go for a romantic walk along the beach, raising fallen night elves as Dark Rangers. And unlike the High Elf versions, this includes males and females, and you know what? Suddenly you've tripled the amount of playable Dark Ranger customization options right there. Now this is actually looking like something that could actually happen. And the really exciting thing is, out of all the options we've highlighted in this video so far, this is the one with the most immediate relevance to the story. Because yeah, we've spent a lot of time with Vulpera and Sethrak, but there's an argument that we're kind of done with them now really, whereas the whole Sylvanas and Undead thing, that's clearly getting more and more important as the expansion goes on. And you get the feeling that having freshly raised Forsaken Night Elf Dark Rangers alongside their High Elf cousins would be incredibly relevant to the story of 8.3. There are a couple of cons to this idea. It would be the 3rd race to utilise the Blood Elf model, which might be pushing it a bit, even if only a 1/3 of Dark Rangers would actually use that model. And it's also difficult to see what classes you'd let them play beyond Hunter, Rogue, and possibly Warrior, but hey, maybe that's enough, right? I still think that it's not only a very likely option, but one that would be really popular with the player base. So I rate Dark Rangers a healthy 7 Delorins out of Plot Hole. And even then, for me, one of the most interesting questions this raises, if the Horde are going to get what amounts to essentially Forsaken Elves made playable, what could possibly be the Alliance equivalent? Well, I'm glad you asked, because it just so happens there's a pretty obvious and appropriate answer. Because it turns out that Sylvanas isn't the only faction leader capable of raising the dead with a little help, because as the events of the Christie Golden novel Before the Storm prove, Anduin can too. With the help of the Forsaken but not Horde priest Alonsus Fowl and Sara, the Naru in the Netherlight Temple, Anduin uses the power of the light to raise Calia Menethil from death, her eyes glowing white, unlike Sylvanas' Forsaken, her mind and personality seemingly totally intact. And it seems impossible, doesn't it, not to think that Calia will be a very important character going forward, seeing as she's a brand new type of undead who happens to be loyal to the Alliance just at a time when Sylvanas is raising Alliance soldiers and royal family members into the Horde. It can't be a coincidence, can it? And could the events of 8.2 see a return for Calia, maybe with an impressive new model, maybe working towards raising her own forces of Lightforged undead to her cause, or maybe even converting existing Horde Forsaken, keen to distance themselves from Sylvanas' whole despicable war crimes thing she's got going on. Maybe Calia's very first recruits will be Jem, Jack, and Jake, the Forsaken soldiers who were killed by Sylvanas and buried by the Alliance at the end of the novel. And that would be the most obvious way to make this race playable, would be to have existing Forsaken models altered with the light for their new Alliance role. But in theory, you could include the undead of any race. Lightbound Forsaken Tauren, anyone? Well, yes, thanks, I don't mind if I do. Granted, this whole theory is a lot more out there than the Horde Dark Rangers, because they definitely exist, and so far, for the Lightbound Forsaken, we only have Calia. But Blizzard have plenty of time to lay the groundwork for that story in 8.2 if they need to, and all in all, I wouldn't be massively surprised to see Lightforged Forsaken facing off against Sylvanas' new recruits in 8.3, so I rate them 6 Christy Goldens out of Heartbreaking Wrathy Graveyards. So what do you think, guys? Should we be prepared for more allied races in 8.2 and 8.3, or are we all frankly allied raced out right now and going to need something else to pique our interest in the Blizzcon announcements? Let us know in the comments below. And thank you for joining us for the midweek Tally essay, even if calling it a midweek video probably comes under the Trade Descriptions Act. Probably going to start writing the new weekly reset in about 5 minutes time. And of course that'll be out as usual on Saturday or Sunday. We'll see how it goes, eh? If you liked this video, don't thank us. Thank our patrons who give their actual real life money to help them all happen. Seriously, without you guys, there would be a whole lot less Taliesin and Evitel videos, so thank you. If you didn't like it, downvote the shit out of it. Remember, my name is Mycio. No, my name is Taliesin from me and Evitel. Until the weekly reset, cheerio.